So yeah, tonight I get to talk to you guys about meal prep. It's something I'm pretty passionate about. It's something I take pretty serious. It's kind of a non-negotiable for me, as I like to consider it. It's something that I do every week, regardless of what's going on. Typically it's something that I personally do a bulk prep, and for me, it's usually a Sunday. But there's often times where something's happening on a Sunday, and it's still a non-negotiable. I get it done on a Friday or Saturday or a weekday. But like Matt was saying, before I jump too far into it, this isn't a lecture. This isn't something for you guys just to listen to. I hope that you chime in. I hope that you give your own thoughts on what you're doing with meal prep. And anytime you can find a way to interject, absolutely do it. So before we get started, quick little activity. I'll explain it later, but I want you to either write down, throw in your notes, basically your 3 favorite sources of protein that you typically eat and your 2 favorite carb sources. So for proteins, right, maybe that's chicken, maybe it's steak, maybe it's lobster. For your carbs, maybe it's I love bread, I love pasta, right? Write down a couple of those. We won't share them quite yet, but I just want you to write down your personal favorites, and then about halfway through, we'll expose them a little bit. So I'll give you just a second to write some of those down. And then as you're doing that, I just want to kind of explain obviously the general premise of meal prep, right? And this isn't meant to add to what you already know. It's basically, hopefully I can show you some different ways to incorporate meal prep, something you haven't heard of, right? Something you aren't doing currently. So as I start to move on here, first thing, most basic, right? The purpose of meal prep. And for most of you guys, you've been clients with one of us coaches here for at least a couple of weeks, and hopefully you're already starting to develop your own patterns of meal prepping. But the biggest purpose, as most of you should know, if you don't already, right? Biggest thing is it helps keep you on track with your goals, right? Its biggest portion is eliminating those excuses. So, I'll speak on my own half, and I'm sure Coach Eric can say the same, but, Coach E, what's one of the biggest excuses you hear for why someone had a bad week in terms of their meals?
I have time to make them.
Hey, all right, let's check this out. No time, right? It's like the number one thing we hear, right? Is I didn't have time to make food today, or I skipped lunch because I didn't have time for lunch, right? I throw this second one in there kind of as a joke, right? But it says, there's no food in the house. The only ingredients that make up foods, right? How often are we searching the fridge, searching the cupboards, things like that for food, and we don't have it because we haven't made it, right? So we have nothing to eat per se. So it's meant to be, meal prepping is meant to be something that's convenient, and it helps you set up and have a plan, right? It's routine. So basically, I want to start off on just some easy ways to make it simple, right? Take you back to elementary school, high school, the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Don't make it too complex, right? When you're first starting out with meal prepping, everybody wants to jump on Pinterest. They want to look up all the fancy recipes. They want to look up all these health foods, healthy recipes. But hardest part about that is if you try and follow 3, 4, 5 different recipes all in one day, you're going to spend 12 hours in your kitchen making those, right? You won't have a day. Your whole day is spent cooking. And everybody knows that's not convenient. So when I typically meal prep, I'll start with single ingredient foods, right? Start with your protein base, right? So I talk here about breaking down your food by its primary macro, right? By now, most of you are getting comfortable with tracking macros, unless you're just getting started and we haven't got you there yet. So we know that we're primarily tracking protein, your carbs, and your fats, right? With that being said, right, when you're planning meal planning, start by sorting out what it is that you need, right? What kind of proteins do I need? So if I'm breaking down my food by its primary macro, fish, steak, some of the things you see on here, eggs, those are all going to be my proteins. Those beans, right? That rice or quinoa there, that's going to be my carbs, right? And then my fats, I got some nuts there, some salmon, things like that also add some good fats. Then don't make it boring. Cook foods you enjoy. You don't need to have a fancy recipe for you to still enjoy it. Just you have to pick foods you like. Don't feel like you're stuck in the typical bodybuilding. I need to have chicken, rice, and vegetables for every meal, right? That's the only way to make it work. So my last note on that is when I say plan out your choices, right? Meal prep, it's a preparation. So in that same note, you need to be prepared for meal prep. You need to know what you want to set aside. You need to know what you need to cook, how much of it you're going to need, all of those things, which I'm going to kind of break down in simpler terms here in just a little bit. So, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of meal prep. So quote me if I'm wrong, but pretty much when people think of meal prep, they basically think of, I got to cook everything on one day, right? On Sunday, I'm going to cook all my food. That is what some of us do. But like Matt said, there's also daily prep, right? For him and the video Aisha had made, they prep out basically what their dinner is going to be. And Matt will be eating that for lunch for the next 2 or 3 days. For me personally, I do this large batch. I call it Sunday prep, right? But I think a lot of that can be taken a step further. And hopefully this is where I start to maybe make it a little more eye-opening. So the first thing, if you're one of my clients, Trina, Kathy, Kim, I saw you guys on here. Maybe Becky, you hear me talk about meat prep. I think I've literally sent you pictures of it. And you might have got this exact picture. But with meat prep, I just basically make sure that my proteins are cooked, right? So I do a large batch. I pick 2 or 3 different meats. And it looks something like this. As you can see there, I had some stuffed chicken breasts with spinach and cream cheese in them. I had a roast and I had some deer back there, right? Pick a few of your favorite proteins, right? You guys are probably seeing where I'm going with this. There's also meal by meal, right? That's where you lay out every single detail of your meal prep, right? You have all your dinners for the week laid out. You have all your lunches laid out, but you still do it in a bulk order like that. Hardest part about that, right, is that takes a lot of prep work. You have to weigh out all your food on Sunday as well and everything there. Then there's things like what Matt does, dinner for lunch. There's things like picking out a single meal of the week, which I'll talk about here in a little bit too. But I wanted to break down this meat prep a little bit, right? So with the meat prep, first thing is it can be done large batch or daily, right? I do it large batch, but what's
Don't
up?
even interrupt. I think Heidi's trying to get in.
Oh, let's let them in.
That might be me. I don't know if you can let him in, Walker.
I got Nona and Kathy back in.
If he's the host, he can. Matt, remember?
Oh, yeah.
You
you
should get
see,
a
Heidi
notification that says admit or not at the top of the screen. Or maybe
Yeah,
at the bottom.
I don't see Heidi, but I did just get Nona and Kathy.
Because Heidi's saying she's having a hard time getting in. I'm
Is
back.
she in?
Oh, you're
Is
back.
Heidi in actual?
I am now. I'm here now. Somebody just
Is
let me in.
that Heidi?
There's Nona.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. All right.
Heidi is under Nona. That's Heidi.
There you go.
All right. Yeah. So with the meat prep, this is what I'm going to focus on most. It's because it's what I do. I think it's something that a lot of people aren't doing, and it makes it pretty simple, right? But it can be done large batch or daily, which is the nice thing. If you do it large batch, you do it like me, like you just saw in that last picture. You pick a couple different proteins that you want to cook, simply because proteins are probably the macro that your coaches are on you the most for anyways, making sure you're getting enough of it and hitting those macros, right? Hitting your protein goals, especially if you're trying to lose weight. I know Coach E can probably talk about this too, and Matt, but if you're trying to lose weight, protein is probably your most important macronutrient. So you guys got to keep that in mind too. And that's why we're focusing a little bit on meat prep, but it's pretty big. And it's also really easy to build a meal around your protein, right? When you think of making a meal, it's like, oh, I'm having steak, right? And then you build around it, right? You have your vegetables with it, you have sweet potato fries, you have whatever else is going in with it, right? So when I'm doing my meat prep, typically, right, select, oh, my computer's freezing. Select 1 to 3 proteins to cook, right? There's all, and with this, to save time, think of different ways to cook your meat, right, guys? If you have a crock pot, hey, throw a roast or chicken in your crock pot, right? Cook some of it in the oven, right? You have a grill or a stovetop, cook some of it there. Then you're cooking 5, 6, 7 pounds of meat, all different meats, and it's all done within an hour, right? But if you're trying to cook everything on the stovetop, you're going to be there for 4 or 5 hours, right? Same thing, then with the meat prep, sometimes you can leave it simply at that. You can build your meals around that all week. I think, Coachy, is that what you said you do?
Yeah, so what I normally do is I either crock pot, grill, or bake my meat, and then I eat my vegetables fresh out of the freezer. I mean, I tell everybody that. I just put, because vegetables, I mean, you technically can eat them raw, so I don't even cook them.
Hey, yeah. Fresh out the freezer or quick in the microwave if you need, if it's on time. Yeah, so with that, for me, I still have to put a lot of carbs in my diet. So I usually pick one base. And that's usually for me like a rice or a potato, right? Something like that. And then what's nice is with carbs, it's the easiest thing to build around because, right, all your fruits are carbs. There's a lot of already prepared carbs that you typically eat, your breads, crackers, anything like that as well. So, and then lastly, pick a couple veggies to cook. And same way, use different methods. If you got a frozen bag, throw it in the microwave, you steam it one way. Another way, you throw out a sheet tray, spray a little oil on them, season your vegetables, please. If you're not seasoning them, you're missing out, right? And throw them in the oven for a little bit till they start to brown, right? And then fats are usually our lowest macro that any of your coaches are probably giving you, right? And with that, that means they're usually the easiest to fill. But I know with some of the people, some of the clients I've been working with, fats are still a struggle. It's something that we're like commonly told, fats make you fat, right? And that's not necessarily true. So we need them still. Easy way to supplement with some of those, add some avocado to your food if you like it. Use a little butter, right? Some peanut butter, nuts, those are all easy fats that you can add in, and you don't have to prepare them. So that being said, before I dive into my week, I want to hear what some of you guys wrote down. So what's some of our go-to proteins?
Mine is chicken, venison, and protein powder. And then my favorite carbs are sweet potatoes and Pop-Tarts, actually. So I eat a lot of meat vegetables, so I'll eat 2 Pop-Tarts and hit my carbs.
Hey, that's how you treat yourself, right?
Yep, and I look at it as dessert.
Yeah. What else we got?
I do chicken and Oikos yogurts, the 000.
Yep.
And my pasta and bread, I'm Italian, I can't help it. But lately I've been doing Kodiak oatmeal a couple of times a week for breakfast, and that's getting me some protein and carbs at the same time.
Yeah, I have Kodiak cakes all the time. They're pancakes for breakfast. If you have the carbs and you can fit them into your day, man, they're good. And they're loaded with protein. You get like 15 grams per serving, you know?
Yep. Yeah, delicious.
Who else we got on here? Mindy, what proteins you write down?
Well, I did protein powder because I'm not a big meat eater.
Okay.
Steak and chicken.
Steak.
But
and
I
chicken.
also use a lot of peanut butter powder. Ask Eric. I'm like crazy about that stuff.
Oh man, I don't like peanut butter powder. I feel like it's dry, but that's just me.
That's how I get my perfect numbers is at the end of the night, I fill everything in with my shake. So
All right.
that's how you do it.
Let me hear a couple more. Sarah, what you got? I see you on there.
I do a lot of seafood.
A lot of seafood?
Yeah, I was just telling Eric the other day I was eating lots of sushi. So then there's my rice as well.
Hey, yeah, that's easy. Only thing is if you have to reheat your seafood, I'm sure whoever else is in your house hates you.
Yeah, well, I don't eat leftover seafood.
Okay, perfect. Then that's the way to go. All right, what else did we write down for some carb sources? Give me something unique outside of rice and potatoes.
Bread.
Oatmeal.
Bread, oatmeal. See, boom. These
I
are
do a
things
lot
you
of
guys should be
protein
thinking about.
pasta.
Protein pasta. Do you do like the chickpea pasta?
No, Maria actually came out with the protein pasta.
Oh, nice.
I'll tell you another good one is a good protein and fat source is hemp seed.
What?
Hemp seed, right? That's what you said, right, Coachy?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
they can be added to everything. Smoothies,
Yep, you can mix it to a
granola.
smoothie. Yep. I used to eat it with Greek yogurt.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know some even at Costco, they have some granola blends, that are like some ancient grains. It's got hemp seeds in it as well, and then a variety of nuts and stuff too. So yeah, you guys got to be creative, dip outside of the normal, unless that's what you like. If it's rice and potatoes and that's what you like, and just steak and chicken, stay inside of there. But yeah, don't be afraid to dabble outside of that too, and think outside the box. If you're not supplementing with protein, but you struggle with it, could be something. Talk to some of the people in here and some of the groups, some of your coaches. We have some pretty good powders and stuff that we like, that we trust, that we think tastes good. So talk to everybody. Use your peers. But I'll talk a little bit about my actual week. If you kind of followed me across my week, I know I kind of already started to talk about it when I just started talking about the general premise of meat prep, but I follow that meat prep pattern as I call it. So typically I do a large batch every Sunday. And as I made note here, I'll kind of come back to it, but I will also do something on Thursdays sometimes. So every Sunday I go and I usually will do a grocery haul, or I'll go pull 2 to 3 proteins out of my freezer, right? And then what I like to do is basically when I'm selecting what carb I want with it, I'll try to just think what's going to taste good or pair well with this, right? Like I'm not going to have sweet potatoes with my fish. To me, that doesn't sound necessarily good, right? But if I'm having steak and sweet potatoes, that rocks. Chicken and rice, if I'm going to make a stir fry, something like that. So I just think about what starch I want to make based on the 2 to 3 proteins that I've selected. Typically for my proteins, I have it in there, but lots of chicken. I do lots of deer because I'm a hunter. For seafood, I do lots of shrimp. Pork tenderloins, they're super lean. There's like no fat on them. So if you want to have more fats later in your day, find tenderloins. And pork tenderloins, relatively cheap. It's like $3 or $4 a pound. And then I do lots of ground turkey simply because it's cheaper than ground beef, but I'll do a leaner 93.7, something like that. And then same thing with my starch, right? You have varieties, but you have pastas, oatmeals, like we just talked about, white rice, different ways to cook potatoes as well. And then I love vegetables. I know not everybody's on that train. So if you're not, I'm going to first challenge you and say, if you're only steaming your vegetables, you're doing it wrong. So who in here hasn't tried roasting their vegetables in the oven? Because if you haven't,
roasting is the best way to do vegetables. I do a huge pan every Sunday and I split them up.
Who's telling me this?
That's Julie. It's Julie.
Oh, good.
And we also do them on the grill, on a big grill pan.
Hey, that's the best way to eat Brussels sprouts.
Yep.
Oh, I love Brussels sprouts. They're the best on the grill.
See, and
I cannot do Brussels sprouts.
Oh,
you could on the grill.
Roasted.
Oh no, my dad has destroyed that for me.
Look, if you roast them or grill them, yes, you can. It's completely different.
They taste like sugar when you roast them.
Yep, it's weird.
Let's be honest. Nobody likes mushy, soggy vegetables, but that's when you get when you steam them.
Yeah.
So granted, when you're in a pinch, but you want to get some veggies in, you want to make sure you're full, steam them by all means. Put some salt and pepper on them, give them a good seasoning, garlic, salt, things like that. But if you got the time and you're already taking a little time to prep, it's not hard to throw a sheet tray in the oven, or while you got some meat on the grill, use the other half of the grill to throw a few veggies on, right? Grilled asparagus, grilled Brussels sprouts, grilled peppers, stuff like that. So good. So utilize some of that. And then same thing with my week, fill in my fats as I go. Basically, I'll know based on that large meal prep that I've done about how much fat I'm going to have left by the end of the day. For me, it's usually after all my meats and stuff. If I just stick to what I've prepped, I got about 40 to 50 grams of fat still left in my day. And that's where I'll throw in maybe with my lunch bag of almonds, right? Or a couple servings of almonds. I'll add avocado to my food. I'll saute some of my reheat my vegetables in a little butter, something like that. So that's an easy way to fill in some of those fats. All right, so what I want to do is I was just going to break down a couple of those other ways, because obviously this meat prep, it's not for everybody. Some people don't want to spend 2, 3, 4 hours maybe on prepping their entire week in one day. And so some of those other options is like a dinner for lunch. And I won't touch on this too much because it's something that Matt has touched on a lot already, and he has some videos on this. But the nice thing about it is you don't get stuck eating the same 2 to 3 proteins that you prep for the week, right? You basically get to make something fresh every night. It also allows for a little more creativity because if you're making dinner fresh, you're probably cooking some kind of recipe, something that you like, something that has a few more ingredients. So, however, I will say it does require a little more work in terms of tracking it in your MyFitnessPal, right? Because if you prep it all at one time in the early part of the week, you know exactly what you're going to be logging for the rest of the week. However, when you do it every night, you got to recalculate whatever your dinner is going to be. If you're Matt, you got it easy, your wife gets to do it for you. So,
Hey,
right?
Walker.
What's
Hey,
up?
Walker. One of the things y'all can do also with your meat, I have 2 friends that are culinary chefs, and they taught me this, to keep it fresh for the week. Right after you cook it, while it's still hot, put it in Tupperware and then put it in the freezer for 10 minutes before you put it in the refrigerator.
All right.
Hmm.
See,
It keeps it tender as shit. I don't even have to warm my chicken up half the time because I season it so heavy, and
Yeah.
it's still juicy and tender when it's cold.
See, and I'll say one of my cooking hacks is when any meat you cook, you want to make, if you want to make it super juicy, like nobody likes dried chicken, is after you finish cooking it or while it's cooking, don't cut into it for about 5 to 10 minutes. Like let it set whole. If you cook a steak, don't cut into the center to check the doneness. Like trust that you've cooked it right and let it set for 5 to 10 minutes. Because what that allows it to do is all the juices settle evenly in the meat and it makes it more tender and more juicy. So if you're not doing that, do that as well. But with the dinner for lunch, it's most suitable for, right, your families. When you guys are like, hey, I got to cook something for my family every night. If you're the main cook in the household, that's where this becomes pretty easy. And you can start to kind of prepare in that way. However, some of the problems you can run into, right, is what happens if whatever you cooked is really good and the family eats it all, right? And you don't have leftovers. Do you have a backup plan? Or 2, to kind of counterbalance that, just things to be thinking of is, make sure, like, there's times like when I talked about earlier, I'll also sometimes do a prep on Thursday. And when I prep on Thursdays, it's usually something a little fancier, as I call it. I'll follow a recipe. I'll make like a meatloaf as opposed to just a single protein, right? Requires a little more work, but then we're gonna have a fresh dinner. But I will go ahead, if it's only a 1 pound meatloaf between me and my wife, we'll pretty much eat almost all of that in one sitting. So I'll take a portion out ahead of time before we even eat and make sure it's set aside for the next day. So those are things you can be doing too. But with the single meal of the week, this one's really good for any of you guys that have super busy work weeks where we hear the excuse that I skipped lunch because I didn't have time, right? This is a really easy way to kind of do the large batch meat prep like I was just talking about, but all you do is you focus on one meal for, say, your lunch, right? Cook 5 to 7 of the same, maybe it's one meat. You got this week, it's chicken, broccoli, and rice, like what's on here, right? You make that 5 to 7 times and at least your lunch is covered. And then if you still want to cook dinner fresh for your family, you like fresh breakfast in the morning, or you eat breakfast typically on the go, like a yogurt or something, you don't have that excuse as why you skipped lunch or why you overate or why you went out to eat at a fast food restaurant because you didn't have anything. And this is probably your quickest method, right? You just make 1 starch, 1 protein, and a vegetable, and maybe add in a bag of almonds or something. And you basically covered all your macros and you've covered your lunches for the entire week. And then you can cook everything else fresh. So just something to kind of have in the back of your guys' head. Last part I kind of want to jump into is actually talking about when you're preparing these things. So I just talk about our proteins and our starches, and then I'm going to turn it to you guys and also talk about our book of the month. So we're rounding the corner here. So talking about preparing our proteins. With this, right? If you're new to meal prepping and you have no idea how much meat you need to cook, some of those things, what your proteins should look like. First, understand this, that breakfast, you're probably not meal prepping a protein for your breakfast. You're probably having eggs or a yogurt or something that's already prepared or fresh like that. But for your lunches and dinners, that's where you're probably having a meat or something for your main protein. So an easy rule of thumb is basically for every pound of meat, you'll get, for every pound of meat, you'll basically get 100 grams of protein. So 1 serving is about 4 ounces, and that's 20 to 25 grams of protein, right? You're gonna get 4 of those. Of course, that varies a little bit depending on how lean it is, right? But you can pretty much expect out of 4 to 6 ounces of meat, you're getting 20 to 25 grams of protein. So for every pound of meat, 80 to 100 grams of protein. So if you need 100 grams a day, that's 700 grams in a week, right? So that's about 6 to 7 pounds of meat, right? With that, consider cooking on different methods like I talked about. Use the crock pot, use the grill, use the oven, make it easy on yourself. And if you want to stick to something simple, this is what I'll do in weeks where I'm in a pinch. Pick one meat, like I talked about, for instance, chicken breast, but cook it 3 different ways, right? You can roast all of your chicken in the oven, take half of it and shred it when it comes out, leave the other half, or take another quarter of that, leave it whole, and the other quarter dice it up. And then you can do things like barbecue shredded chicken, right? And then you have your diced stuff to make stir fries, and then your whole stuff you can just eat with whatever your starch is, right? Then you're at least feeling like you're eating different meals as well. Then when we talk about preparing starches, same concept, right? Just different rule of thumb. So a serving size of a carbohydrate is typically about the size of your fist, right? About a cup of rice is about the size of your fist. 1 medium potato, about the size of your fist. So when you're thinking about how many starches to cook for the week, right? Rice triples in size, if you didn't know that, about triples in size when you cook it. So if you cook 1 cup of rice, you're going to get about 3 servings. 2 cups of rice, you're going to get about 6 servings, right? Same, and then with your potatoes. So if you're having potatoes, it's 5 to 10 potatoes that week. If you're having rice, about 2 cups is a pretty good guess. And then same thing, if you're cooking pasta, something like that, about a fistful is just an easy rule of thumb. But of course, you guys are weighing everything as well. Same thing, use different methods. Get a rice cooker if you don't have one. They're cheap. They're like $10 at Walmart. Cook your rice there while you're cooking pasta or potatoes in the oven, right? Make a plan for what you're pairing your starches with. If your meats that you have prepped are steak and chicken, like I said, you're probably not having, I don't know what you wouldn't have with chicken, but if you're having fish, you're not having sweet potatoes or something with your fish, so plan what starches you want with your proteins and what actually sounds good. Come into it with a plan, right? And same with your vegetables. Rule of thumb, a pound bag of vegetables is going to give you about 4 servings, right? Quarter. So you're going to get 4 servings out of a small bag of vegetables. Quarter pound, same thing. It's going to turn out to be about a fist size or just a little bit